Check, check. Happy face?
G'day,
Hello?
Lukey.
Hey, hey,
Hey,
Dr.
mate.
Jubb.
How you doing?
Okay.
Yeah. Uh,
Thank you so
really,
much. How are
really
you?
good. Good, mate. Yeah, really great. Have you been live streaming lately, mate?
Uh, I, yeah, I've been, trying to, live stream a lot more. Um, I guess I got
Yeah.
triggered this
Um,
morning and deleted it.
yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. So it's what makes it out there, and like you said, something always could be recut. Yeah. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
The world where someone is inside themselves, like you said, and it matches. So what's inside and outside matches in awareness where someone is. And a master piece, Lucy, is inside, yeah, and we could look at everything through this, couldn't we? But a good question might be, without you, for instance, right, if you could imagine this, of course you should, which is the world still there, you see?
Right.
Within you see. So what happened where this is within? Something was there to witness your birth and get that sensation, imprinted, and that was present. Must have been before you were born, and it's carried in the living, yeah. And this is I, which is the stellar as empty space, basically, and am, in the Celtic tradition, sort of relates to the care or matter or body, basically. Yeah. And so that's the only thing that they could say is certain is I am. And it's interesting because, one could study who I is and am, and that's the basis of Jubb's Little Red Book, really, which is a synopsis of 28 days of training, those first two books, eye
Oh,
awareness and verifying your map.
wow.
But shouldn't everyone pay attention, of course, to what is most critical, isn't it? Where anything is, and can it, you have good advice where someone is, and everyone's tuned to what good advice is because it's sort of like water finding its own level, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It's sort of really amazing. Yeah. So shouldn't everyone anywhere where there's some conflict is they could put themselves there, right there, and present where Israel and Palestine and Syria is, in Egypt and Turkey and all these nations, right where this is, Lebanon. So one could know really one doesn't really have to know the cause of an event when things such is more multiple caused, isn't it? And so not to have influenced the event and events, which isn't in need for someone to know what the cause was per se, to have acted and be acting, in an ethical way. But everyone, of course, sort of has something, don't they, which is common, and of course that's C.B. Carroll, which really is, as a system, you and I, less than performing our own civic duty as we should, yeah?
Okay.
And what happens when we do, and what happens when we haven't. But you could see the freeze symptoms, couldn't you, where anything is, and like the ICE-9, which is like that December 15th sort of timetable a little bit. But couldn't it be a freeze on all the put stock, you know, because people are going to make out like bandits because the stock would fall or something. But it should be, shouldn't it? Because you could see what can safeguard where currency is. But yet, you and I, we really need to know, don't really have to know, of course, the causes per se. Yet, one really is devotion, more simple. We could really make the world like you were saying at the beginning, inside self, you know, and we could change, stop, restart various things. You want to put things together which really do make sense. And on the ground where people are most are interested to look in and be like a fly on the wall, and you can see people causing transformation, and one looks within self, and we could know about the world where someone's living inside, and you could know the world that you're living inside, as someone can for the world that they're living within. But appearance, like a reflection in a mirror, certainly isn't reality. And making a special appearance is outside what that appearance is, but its appearance and to be in a fictional state, yet, you know, you who is living really is who is real, and this is the fourth estate. So to be degenerate, one could have only looked at something like you're making an appearance, but that's not this I, which is pervasive, omnipresent, you know, and pervading and more ever present. And so it doesn't make sense, of course, to anybody that someone could pray to one, right, and see thousands of perish in the meantime, you see? So who's praying to one where thousands are perishing? That's the question. I think that people who weren't allegorical per se, you know, certainly Muhammad, you know, is definite, wasn't necessarily allegorical whatsoever. But isn't it ethical, like you or anybody would go beyond a world where you're just seeing it full of an accidentalness itself, which you and I can. And this is the fourth estate, you see. So Cloud Two Children really did this and modelled it. And for me, this father really, and given, so something given or taken from me, like my son, for instance, was, which is mine as a property and his as a property to enjoy. It's really us, which what is all mine also is ours. But where governance is not, of course, it's what I am more. That's none, which gave anything such to me. I mean, that's not, government didn't give that to me. It's really a grain of sand on a beach facing the ocean, isn't it, really? And I am is a fact, of course, in being, and the land really is mine, and that all growing up is ours, of course, and this is common strange attractor, which really is comes along because a charge is only one law in nature, and that's that the claim made is fulfilled and discharged. So that's the new reset on everybody's lips, of course. You're moving into a golden age of Aquarius where one doesn't want to anybody else's name just to have been in vain, yeah. And science really can confirm that no contagion is, and certainly that the issue or a claim doesn't exist about carbon that's caused all that tax. So a lot of energy really should be really being put more to what's clean, you know, and conversation really. But it's external reality, which really is more than just an appearance, isn't it? You know, and from the land, that's a venue to revenue or republic all that debt and credit, which had never any of it had been spent proper. But yet, it's really a question in it, you and I, where we could ask ourselves, that's imposed, of course, events. You know, one can see more causeless. A thing which is incurred more is a cause and isn't assigned to be a memory or a recall of some event that it could be the actual event, of course, which it isn't. So experience and memory of events really is uncaused, isn't it? Because too many variables are going on where somebody has, and looking at the world within themselves, and what is this? So where this father really is in the work, of course, is really coming from room more and space, and being beyond space and time. So it's a governing more that's causality, and so it's not really a special appearance that you'd appear more in fiction, but from the land joined with the living, and the living joined with the living, like what a common law court of record trial by grand jury process more is, which is the fourth estate, you see, which is above the legislative assembly. And so in New York State, for instance, like we could bring this up just a bit in a moment, but could somebody really see an eye where, of course, that you're not perception itself, you're aware of perception. So one can't be just a sensation, and one could know what's felt. You could feel, hear, and see in a JC context, yet nothing is improved upon. Yet it's the public trust, you know, where you're living more with faith and honour, and to what's a common practice, which should be, and where it's not, you correct this. But it's movement really is a sequence of really something interceptive or some conjunction of some affair within ourselves, like flavour, really, or fragrance, or even colour, which is an example of liberty, isn't it? And being equal before the law, where everything really is an example of things interlinked, and being numberless of causes. It's the mind which really is still and transparent, which is the changeless amongst the background of things. So it's very changeful. But eye awareness really is beyond just waking, having woken itself alone. It's really more than a state of being, but a state of mind, but being. And the common factor, which really is you and I, which really is the real estate, and that's the sacred cow that hasn't really been talked about, but of unlimited worth, which in a JC economy, in a golden age, this is how currency is created, you see, from positive induction, and it's way beyond the value of any commodity or anything. But it's really the fiction, and that you and I we all own in a system, you see, that's selected. And when we hadn't done that, well, anybody wants to be regulated more on the outside, haven't they? Because they're not doing the right thing, and so it's disastrous for everyone. It's certainly down the chain. Otherwise, And so it's a chain really of command more from where the people, and everybody's inquiry could really show what the due diligence is done by an official, and all things which can be found at some charge can be discharged, of course, and zeroed out, which that's the new research. But what's the referential index where you or I are getting any information from, and what's your orientation? Is it internal, external, omnipresent? But all really are more inquiring from a centre point within themselves, and can we see what the leading questions really are, and who's ever come from the outside to tell you that? Of course, this father really is, really comes and goes just as all, and it's one's own mercy not to be evidence, of course, of what this father's world is, which we're talking about, yet to have got wrapped up in a world where someone was only where some demise was, or fake, which one could learn what stalking is, so that you could, it's really the art of the means to be able to change the destiny of your fate. So it's really everyone, could you say, is sort of an Israeli or Palestinian or Ukrainian or Rohingya, in Myanmar. But it's really the CBCAL controllers that you could see they need that World War III, don't they? And did really the Israeli Defense Forces, and who are those people and who is in charge where that is, including all the hostages and who would fund all of it that's behind the scene of all, which all the big alphabet soup land, but yet it's really a massacre of the people. And 195 national corps is very fictional, isn't it? But the living is really what you're talking about. But something else is going on, isn't it? All talk of a bankrollness by a criminal banking cartel, really, of the one world order, which in the all caps got franchise and trademark sort of thing. But how crazy is that somebody would give anybody the permission to have appellation and take appellation away from everybody else? But all believe where something is, where the all caps is where trade is marked, it's really Crown property, which really means controllers of CBCAL. And so a monopoly really allowed, really behind all the hidden data on the scene, is really the same group, more or less, where D weapons and honest to God geoengineering and doomsday types of weapons, where somebody can look into those things which is existing, and to alphabet soup land led narrative isn't. It's like somebody got a script, but that's sort of swiftly debunked, isn't it? One could see the plan really for a greater state where something is like a land grab, and it's always like the skies are getting sprayed, and who's doing that, and why doesn't anybody know? It's like, so how can there be any demonocracy if there isn't any transparency? But all around the globe, like it's really COVID, because you've got a big alphabet soup land, and you could just keep going with the alphabet soup land, like Mossad or USA or China or any of these inks co-opted, all really is to become a sort of lapdog. And apparently, where everybody knows you didn't go to the moon, and it really is health, of course, here, or legal sense, under usury of debt bondedness. And all can see really agenda of the CBCAL controllers who really sort of need all of that to function for themselves, like World War III. And essentially, like a tool used more like asymmetric, certainly, it's what usury really is. And so, the question whether combat helicopters were actually ones that killed people who were escaping isn't in a fray of a grey area where somebody's got orders just to have done with anybody that would be any movements. It's really a level of impunity where anybody is given as an agent sort of inside the company, which cannot have the same sort of ethic as you and I, because it's sort of got to go through beast boot camp to have that. But the ethic of cleanse to murder and demolish, but in anybody's name can't and doesn't add up to anybody. Of course, collective punishment and genocide, and individually, like someone not having had their natural right, would be wise that it's put back that you've got a real true idea, of course, where somebody could look into this. Otherwise, it's a real fascism anybody could see, and like the Dutch farmers or even Gaza now, all the land grab sort of going on. People's upset a bit about it, but Subikawa really, as a system, is it selected? You and I, we never selected the Big Mick, for instance. It needed it needed Israel for to be used more as a wrecking ball, and corpse being used more as one's own domestic and international wrecking ball, not being regulated internally. It's really you and I where the enemy is, because if somebody can't hear, it's as deaf, of course, as those who wouldn't be able to have seen, isn't it? And who is really none so deaf more as anybody that's blind, that really isn't looking at what one could see, yet really hasn't done anything about that. But the land grab, given this possession, what's fictional, is very far away from what really is a jubilation of an inner eye, where this comes from am in you, and after a world where being or is in balance, you've got the fourth estate, that's we the people, that's really the proper chain of command, and you really can't blame refugees or anybody for their own plight, especially when all false flags really have been rife, and you could see people being driven out of third world nations, and isn't that a problem? What goes on where somebody is being resettled in themselves is really often a civic confinement and entrapment as an idea. But it's very nefarious part of World War III, that any acceleratedness is like causes this strange attractor, which is an assemblage point of something in the future, which really causes these charges to have been discharged. And so if anybody is syndicated, it really is because no red line really was ever crossed there, and that's an ongoing maybe thing. But also Lone Rangers, you've got archetypal, seriously fed up with what you'd see. Of course, nobody wants to be Swiss bank defaulted, and the slow collapse of all the controlled demolition really kicked off. So Friday, December the 15th, sort of is at the beginning of the Vice 9. I mean, could China Inc. and all where severe sort of insolvency comes signal like a huge investment risk where you could look at commercial real estate, for instance, the market, or having questioned, could those all be signals really that something else is at stake, you see, because that's a real question, you know. Most have never considered the importance of currency, and what happened in Cameroon, and did anybody in the past, in millions perish, and what's gone on in the last 100 years? Most cannot even be aware where any nation perhaps is even, but you could see the controllers of Subico really perhaps looking toward, a World War III, and it's really like never not a rising star getting selected somewhere that's within anyone's nation that is a company, Manchurian, and Subico are sort of bidding being done. It's really like a candidate alert because it's really to find out that something totally not too honest really always it could be present there with some sort of candidate, but it's the controversial missing bits, isn't it, of background and policy, where you look and see a lot of reversals all of a sudden happen, and so you've got things like what happened, at the fate of the Beneleki people in the genocides and things that's gone on in Africa. And what does somebody know of how did it all occur? But it really takes currency from various sorts of gold fingering, and that gold fingering can be more currency than that nation could have ever had itself. So it's, are people equal to each other? Where's liberty? It really is a clandestine purpose that, like a big agri-farmer is someone who owns that, is the stakeholder, and revenue, and yet all of it is the stakeholder managed inconsistencies, and not common law, natural right, equity, really, of we the people. So a default is really called any time, isn't it? By we the people, it certainly is, it's done. But when does that go on for where the corpse is? Well, we could look at the CBCOA books, you could see 149 trillion British pounds, that's trillions, and it's get ready really is in an equity swap. And due that to be settled sort of Friday, December the 15th in 2023. It's an exchange between two counterparties, of course, and the parties' cash flow legs, of course, all pegged to the floating rate of what a Libra is, which is the cost of trading between the insiders. And it's all called equity legs. It also is to cause any investor barrier, where there would be just all of a sudden to have vanished, where some are. But it's a gigantic amount of currency, of course, that's suddenly now at stake, and is banking, where there's sort of what's going on, where some liquidity is. Of course, at 10-7 and a 9/11 and all of those sorts of things, it's really a bossing people around. And could anybody see that be a setup? Of course, World War III sort of ICE 9 is like a Friday, which is on the cards, which shouldn't all be put stock, for instance, trade and that sort of thing be stopped, because you've got bandits that's making out with currency, and isn't that sort of where the story is, which has been predicted in the narrative as currency held hostage, which we talk about. But it's a heinous act where you've got massacres that weren't stopped in the past, and didn't the fate where it wouldn't be something similar. Of course, Libya was a place where you could get a claim settled. Suddenly, you've got boat people that was made, and Palestinians, and the due weapons and things like this, where people are getting stormed out, burnt out, and geoengineered out. Those are sorts of things which kind of really are ongoing, aren't they? Yeah. And so, yeah, it's an interesting thing. A memory, also an experience, is incommunicable in the Toltec tradition. So, of course, if you could sit and listen as I did to Cloud Two Children, the only teaching that Cloud Two Children had was about heaven here on earth. And it would be for me to apprentice with her for 4 years and go on the road for another 5. And it was really beloved seeking personal development that came to Cloud, and all faced really some sort of more individual sorts of challenges and things, which a notion of medicine, beloved, really was an idea of a saint when people would be searching, you see, and would be common and all be in an experience, also memory, yet not really a way of life at all. And so the Toltecs always reminded everybody it was just sort of more of a two-way street, Ricky, where someone is, yes. And Cloud always, which you'd hear her later prove, how would there be any way to pass on any memory of an experience to another? Of course you can't. And I only saw as an artist, some would say, you'd hear Cloud to all know, how receptive someone is. Yet you and I being in the void, in an unknowingness of the moment, it's sort of like the present being unwrapped. And this is in a pattern that somebody could have to be able to receive communication. But in the New Age movement, you'd hear people's responses like some agreement where a receiver is yet only you've got somebody that was a projector in a picture, yet it's really given some polar completeness where anybody is versus some polarized view of something. And if not seeing, giving your really seeing more where these happy faces really more inside, freshly, freely more given, and tirelessly more where something is belonging inside. So how about a real true ID actually than one that's just of a bridged ride, which, a real true ID comes from title, not some profession or some activity. But how a medicine man could really share this I with you and response sort of more, somebody could hear clearly more and be more realised. And it's really time less travelled where somebody can be being invited more to. And, it's giving really is a two-way street. So sharing kind of really isn't what goes on, isn't it? It's really giving, because then this is your sort of... So it's giving which really exists. It's a two-way street. And generally there's a greater shortage of receptivity than there is giving. A question really is more, one should be more in trust. And as we've got positive economic inductance put, things are taken care of ever more. One is looking through the eyes more of having moved into an age of Aquarius, out of the age where we've been. But how could one stay more with me longer, and one could then come to trust more, and to trust and to follow the master more of self. One gains insight into awareness more, and one could really have this insight inside, and one cannot really know the mindset otherwise of his father, yet really none could know the mind of anyone who's serving more as less than a two-way street. So know where the pattern really is, and it's really an outer art to express what the inner experience is more, and to gain more, where mastery is, and that could be looking into the fourth estate, which is above governance, and really what happens where transparency hasn't really existed. One could say sort of something was legal there, wasn't it, where someone could have been put into a quarantine camp, which we could talk about in a second, but you've got everything that's a given frequency, and what's really behind chemtrails, for instance, and carbon, and climate change, which a lot of experts show agreement, that no proper construct and no context exists to be supporting of the massive amounts of carbon that's are being taxed and things and looked at. But clean energy is really what people can be talking about more versus all what's going on where chemtrails exist, which one should withdraw the consent, of course, for things just like that, because you've got no transparency into what the intent is behind any of it, and can't any. It should be something complying more, and certain, not with any unlawful order, where one really could go a little bit more and learn more about this by going to jubbdavid.com. We could look at the Eclipse movement, which is really about getting rid of usury. Yep. It's really a history of the world where you could look and see, well, everything got shut down suddenly at the same time, which never existed before. And it's a national security risk, wouldn't you say, that something could go on like that, personally, and to know the truth, which really a warfare is where you don't, and a doomsday weapon, if you know, you look into, and you've got the same system of off-terrain, outside a nation, private, non-sovereign entity, which is a scale beyond any corporate nation, and only like a
Hello?
Yeah, like a fat slopped off, like a trough, like a train going past of gravy. But we could come from where we are all as people, yeah? For credit spent. Got a bit of noise in the background there, mate.
Me? Oh, sorry about that.
Oh,
is that better?
Yeah, you'd be really hard pressed to kind of see you've got that like going on again. I guess it's sort of like in the background buzz, but now it's not. But you've got really transparency where everything is. Otherwise, you really haven't got really consent given, and anybody to employ any doomsday weapon that has been, and the use of weather to be applied more where asymmetric warfare is. And quarantine camps can go back to 2021 December bill, where you're looking in New York, for instance, and you can see soaring horse techniques used, which is not proper, of course, things going on where the legislator is of the state, which is allowing the corpse more to take away natural right and to, replace it with an indefinite detention. And if somebody was unvaccinated, it would be deemed by someone's personal discretion that somebody posed a risk to the public. It's Bill 416, Bill 416, which was New York State Public Code, and it was really getting a 1-2 if you add the numbers up, of course. In business jargon, it's really an opinion, but under suspicion of the governor, to identify anybody that was a person that was unvaccinated. One could be sent off, to one of these camps, but you've just got vague, past fraudulent language, and and how can anything be contractual, which it isn't, without consent? But if a person was really deemed dangerous because they were unvaxxed, they could be required to have some sort of forced treatment and to waive detention to be indefinite, you see. So any disease considered contagious, suddenly, and how many have been, it's just endless, hasn't it been? So it's really nothing scientific there, but essentially New York State Legislative Assembly has been given more power sort of to control the spread of some disease, and placed upon the books, you see, and then because it wasn't done by anybody else, it would be done by the executive branch, and that's crazy, that you don't have any separation of power. But where somebody has a claim from the venue, from the land, that's not commercial. The procedure really is jurisdiction, which is government discretion, and which is standing And so the sitting New York state legislators really certainly isn't above government discretion, and one can't see, of course, which we should be, we the people, getting proper care. But yet, how does that happen under any vice admiralty, which really isn't protecting any natural right for you and I, and isn't the proper court that could do that? It's not an proper Article 4 or 3/4. It's the Supreme Court of we the people. But the corpse really only itself, which is lower order of being and fiction on a fictional level, that the corpse gives itself the ability, to lock away yours or my choice, and to have any forced sort of treatment, which is coming down the pike, and somebody did that, but and is living that's behind that corpse, and that everybody else is below the corpse, isn't a correct kind of chain of command wording figures. So a government which could really be in a future moment has the power to put some sort of anybody into a quarantine condition, you see. And so you really looking at the whole world standing by more, witnessing a massive international protest going on, and US weaponry, including Hellfire missiles, which definitely was being applied to innocent victims, and some at the moment, maybe some 15,000 more as you go to air, where people have been slaughtered in Gaza, certainly. You've got airline pilots going non-stop, having talked and given the story narrative about chemtrail and what's going on where CB is running those things from a war room where extermination more has been its set. And so, one can look and see the effect of this in Ukraine and Gaza, and shockingly silent witnessing of what's totally unacceptable, isn't it? Not to be internally regulated and have to have some war on ourselves to stop those types of things. That's not a pretty picture that anybody would look upon in the rest of the world, although this is taking charge and discharging the charges and causing private property to be more protected versus not. But in previous history, it took time, didn't it, for all selling to happen, didn't it? It wasn't just all of a sudden. But what's needed now is just one of the too big to fail entities to be shifting things. Everything goes through a reeling and a large amount of investors, and we the people. It's like, is that an ice-9 possibility, December 15th, that an international alliance has all become more dissociated because no trade agreement or what's to be upheld. CBCO agenda really is for a flow, and the military machine is really just wiping everything out. It's doing the opposite. The actual occurrence of a more sudden, where IS-9 is pulled, how much attention was taken away, so one isn't aware that something is existing so hard-boiled like this. But chemtrails certain have carcinogenic compound and have to be really as dangerous substances moved around and signed off for, and flying in the air, all that has to be signed off for. I mean, economically, by substance, how much does it all cost and where does that come from? But what's economically negatively inducted that's removed, it's just a good fortune that somebody might be living somewhere on the outskirts of a land grab where that's going on. But nobody gave permission for any millions of nanoparticulized toxins sort of to be sprayed so that it's a haze covering the earth that's invisible to most people's microscope in their eyes. Yet 311 in Japan and CB Kawa's company operations How could anybody say that a claim from the venue from the land doesn't exist? That's a procedure. That's the proper jurisdiction is government discretion. You see, yes, so it's really what really goes on where somebody could have been put into a doomsday scenario, and the risk of Public Bill 416, which is the New York State Public Code that you're getting the 1-2, you see? And so when is it that everybody sort of wakes up a little bit more? But you've got a nepocratic agent legally able to have killed, where you're looking at things, and an agent really for a company that is, has gone through some training at boot camp and can be accepted to be killed. And each of these people could have a very different mental set than you and I would. We would have a common sense of things, which is common parlance in our own habits. And so a check and balance really is what the fourth estate is. And you've got a lot of criminal activity which really is gone on, and until that's addressed, it goes on, doesn't it? It's really Article 4 and 3 courts where something is instituted by we the people that's supreme, not a corpse of itself, which is the lower order. You and I have to see, we don't really, really have to see the agent's methods of any madness. We'd really keep in mind a scene more where politicians' positioning more is like a false flag itself, apparently something acceptable, but you and I really just getting dragged into some show, and that's like a fake, not any confrontation proper, but war mixed up with reality, not common law. Really is seeking agreement, which is the pen is mightier than the sword, where someone's seeking agreement with their adversary to settle the charges. And so it's really quite a criminal intent of the opposite, more warmongering instead, all done really as a pretextual criminal act, more set up, and you and I looking on yet through common sense, a common consensus. Really, you could see that past warmongering really was a block, and was just hostility and vehemently opposed always by the public, and everybody was shoulder to shoulder to see no care for a foreign influenced alliance that wasn't sovereign, and plenty of times in history where people could see such. Of course, commercially at a time where somebody's just going to be divvying up the war spoil for themselves, and it's a land grab, and you've got neptocrats really working for the company, not you or I, with the people. You've got territory which really is part of somebody's neighbouringness, and off terrain and in a grey area nations where something is looked at as some bargaining and a reason to get that. And so agent corps leaders really go along where you've got false flag to achieve some sort of embroiledness, where some ideology is being primed, and that's not common, but to launder currency, and the control is more of a big mick. And so resistance really out there is often just a controlled opposition and staged, and villains more ongoing as a pattern to polarise and fuel the coffers of C.B. Caramel. But your neighbour, simply, people don't want just to be taken over and to stand by and see all that activity and actual motivated land grab by the few against other neighbouring nations' borders, because no articles of peace and security is being upheld but broken and should be upheld. But if you look at the agents, really, you could see a lot of strange behaviour there going on where look at the background. But getting where the people really pushed around non-stop, and keep in mind that war really is instigated by the unelected and those who got there by favour, and can't say that they didn't. So acting as foreign agents, but in positions which graft and criminality should be ensured, yet all installed puppet CBK sort of positions where someone is like that. You're looking at a bigger picture, and why wouldn't one want to rule out the condition and how come that's redacted? Well, you'd think criminals redact things, and that to be the reason that monopolisation of where any news is or anything isn't something which isn't coming proper yet from a company agent in some criminal activity in the history, and you could see a lot of backflops, reversals in anything that was said, something done to gain attention, and then the opposite. Once somebody's got some position, an agent really is often behind that, definitely, and unethical in the scene. And so facing some rising popular opposition always, you've got a promising peace, of course, where you've got the tail which has been wagging a dog, the election rigged and pre-installed, and always one could see a spotting of an agent where stuff has gone on like that, a shady background scene to make a massive errors where something is being supposed to be protected, and then you look straight away to see a press spin that's monopolised on the view, means and slanting some favourableness only ever towards its own agenda. A war really isn't able to be really ever like going past something which is a meat grinder. That's not a proper idea on the front. It's just a killing of conscripts, 100,000 or more Ukrainian soldiers, and many, who's to know, all opposite campaign promises, you see, where that was. An agent who buys up all the farmlands and is really engaged with selling these to big hedge fund investors behind the scenes, set up way into a future. Isn't that person someone that should be voted out, of course, until you've not yet you've got 500,000 people maybe murdered, and who we the people knew really, which is a vanguard of some sacrifice next to weakness, and we're all nations really are. You and I, well, we'd be just talking about it, but isn't it that people are being moved more toward ICE-9 and the eventual Friday, which is a setup coming, which really is a method of madness where warmongering is, and those are agents and people carrying that out. So we shouldn't really continue with any of that because it's such a cost is so high to uphold the past, and no one wants to be Santa's little secret gift. If you're an animal, on the farm, and to gain some corrupted concession, to have just continued on by a reality which is a better future. Everything else that isn't should be stopped because you've got a greater, larger actual, and yet a concentration really has to be a focus, of course, an attitude where anybody is. And you and I, we're living, and the living being, and a system exists under the Magna Carta, which contract is the only thing which has held all the world together. And so it really behooves everyone to see that the common enemy really is that you and I have not been performing our civic duty, which should, and that's what's prophesied it all comes to be eons and time ago to this day. So the corpse has really said it's very gallant, and people could say that it's afraid, but it doesn't have any feeling. Out there, you've got you don't have a central organised nervous system like you do inside, and everybody else does that you could be joined with. So the living is joined with the living, and then the dead is with the dead, versus fascism joining who's living up and keeping everybody in a fictional level. And so just wrapping things up, of course, you've got really nepotistic agents legally having been able to kill, and you've got certain it is all that going on before an Article 4 or 3 court could have been, and it's really for you or I, it should be, and that's what we really, all of us should be getting onto, yeah? Because none of us want to be Santa's little secret gift, do we? If you're an animal on the farm, certainly not. Anyway, mate. Yeah. Mm. So we'll catch up to each other, eh? Yeah.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Jubb.
Yeah. Love you, mate.
You're the best.
Come on, mate. Bye.